Good evening, everyone. My name is Jayant Kapatkar, and I'm speaking from Pune in India. And I would like to welcome each one of you to this webinar, and I sincerely hope you will enjoy this presentation. The topic of our discussion today is soul, heaven, and transmigration. What is soul? What is heaven? And what is transmigration? These topics have been debated since the start of mankind. Each tradition and each religion has its own viewpoint, and generally there is hardly any consensus between them. Today, based on the teaching of Vedanta, we will try to give you a fresh and a unique perspective to these topics. So we will be covering the following topics today. What is soul? Where does heaven exist? Does transmigration really happen? Let's start off with the topic, understanding soul. What does soul mean? If you see the definitions in different dictionaries, the Merriam-Webster defines soul as the spiritual part of a person that is believed to give life to the body. The Cambridge Dictionary defines soul as follows: the part that continues to exist in some form after their body has died. From these two definitions, we can somewhere conclude that the soul is something other than the physical body, and it is supposed to be the essence of a living being. So what is the essence of a living being? We just mentioned we are not the body part. What part of the body-mind complex is the soul? Obviously, if you investigate, it cannot be the body. It cannot be the mind. What else is there within us which could be defined as a soul? The answer which comes to us is the ego. So ego in some way is part of the soul. The correct terminology used in Vedanta for ego is called ahamkara. Ahamkara means, aham means I, and kara means maker. So the maker of the I is called ahamkara. So there's some entity within us which gives you the feeling of I, and that feeling of I is called ahamkara. But in this talk today, we'll be using the terminology ego and ahamkara interchangeably. Let's try to understand ego, and let's try to understand the profile of ego. So we will discuss this topic in two different ways. What is the profile of the ego, and what is the container of the body which contains the ego? The profile of ego. This one will is something here. Let me just get rid of it. Yeah, perfect. So the profile of ego. The ego, like I mentioned earlier, the feeling of I is within us. Each one of us has a feeling of I within us. And that feeling of I is called the ego in a way. And some examples of to define this I am this body, I am this mind, I am happy, I am son. So it can go on and on. Actually, the ego plays many different roles during our day-to-day affairs. For example, you can say, I'm the father. When you play the role of a father, you call yourself, I'm the father. When you play the role of a son, I am the son. Or when you go to the office, you can say, I'm the boss, or I'm the subordinate. And when you go and meet your friends, I'm the friend. Or when you meet your family, I'm my brother, I'm my sister. So you can see the ego plays many different roles on our day-to-day affairs. And this ego, if we try to understand, ego is something like your resume. It's like your biodata. It contains all the information of the I am. It includes all the historical events of the past lives. All your past lives is included into this I am, which creates this I am at the moment. It's a sum total of all your past lives also and all your past events. All your personality traits come up in the I am part of it. In a way, you can say your current ego is because of your past. Whatever you lived in the past, what are the attributes you collect in your past, that becomes your current ego right now. So ego is something more than the I feeling. It has got a lot of more ingredients into it. So the ego, we try to understand what it is. It is something which is giving the feeling of I, but this ego needs a container. It needs a box. It needs a vehicle to function. The ego needs some sort of vehicle to drive itself through. So what is that vehicle which contains this ego? To understand this, we need to go back to Vedanta teachings. Vedanta teaches that every living being has three separate bodies. You have a seed body, you have a subtle body, and you have a gross body. The gross body we all know. We see our gross body, we see our legs, we see our hands, we see the different parts of our body, and that obviously is the gross part of the body, of the gross body part. Then we have a subtle body. The subtle body is nothing but your mind. All the perceptions, all the thoughts, all the memories, all happens within your mind. So that is the subtle part of your body. Subtle body, they call it. And then there's a seed body, which is sitting right deeper into us, basically. So in a way, the seed body creates the subtle body, and the subtle body creates the gross body. We need to understand the seed body in a little more detail. Understanding seed body. We have seen seeds. We have seen the seeds which are for a tree, for a plant. Everyone has seen a seed. Isn't it amazing when you see a seed, the plant or the tree is already inbuilt in the seed. So when you put the seed in the soil and put water in it, the saplings come out and it grows into a plant, and the plant can become a tree, and the tree lives its full life. So the seed already has the potential tree already inbuilt in the seed. And when it germinates, it plays out the blueprint which is already inbuilt in the seed. So whatever is in the seed, it plays out that role basically. For example, if the seed is a rose seed, you will always get a rose plant. When you put a rose seed, you will never get a mango plant or mango tree. You will only get a rose tree. So the ingredients of the tree is already built into the seed. In the same way, if you think about it, every living being also has a seed body. You have a seed body. I have a seed body. Every living being has a seed body. And this is very important to understand, that seed body is where everything lies. So we need to understand the seed body in a lot of more detail. The seed body contains your ego, and it contains many other things. It contains the I-ness part of it, the feeling of I, which I mentioned earlier, is within your seed body. It also contains your past history, all your past history, not only for this life, but your previous lives. Everything is stored in the seed body. All your personality traits, all the quirks you have, the positive qualities you have, the negative qualities you have, all are stored in your seed body. And also your pending karmas. You have a huge bunch of karmas which are still waiting the results to fructify. And those are all sitting in your seed body. So the seed body is, if you take all the mix of all these things together, the seed body is like your source code, your blueprint, which contains all your past information, and it will blossom depending on your past information sort of thing. So seed body, you can see, is contains your I feeling. It contains all your past history. It contains your personality traits, and it all contains your pending karmas as such. So this seed body is defined as your soul. So when people talk about the soul, they're really talking about your seed body as such. And we mentioned all the characteristics of the seed body. The seed body is your soul. A lot of commentaries I've seen and a lot of literature I've seen, they call the subtle body, the mind, as your soul. No, the mind is not your soul. Because when you die, obviously the gross body goes away. Even your mind goes away. There's nothing left there. What is left when you die is only your seed body. The seed body is your soul. And this seed body is dynamic. It's not a static thing. It is always evolving. Every action you take influences your soul, it influences your seed body. Whenever you take an action, a groove is created in your seed body. And the deeper the groove, the more deeper the groove will be, the personality traits will be much stronger. For example, we've seen when you have water, rainwater coming down a mountain, it comes down and different grooves are created. Where the volume of water is large, the groove is much deeper. And where the volume of water is less, the grooves are much lower till it reaches the bottom planes, basically. The same way, every action you take creates a groove within your seed body. For example, if you play music for 10 hours, you practice music in a very dedicated fashion, you practice music for 10 hours. So the groove will be much more deeper in your personality trait. it will have much more influence on your seed body. If you do meditations for 10 hours or for long periods, or for do puja on a long period, it will all have an effect on your seed body. In the same way, if you do bad actions on a regular basis, if you lead a very adharmic life, and it has an influence on your seed body. So the seed body is very dynamic. So every action you take has an influence on your seed body as such. So it's not static, it is continuously being updated. And also your seed body and all the karmas also which you have also has an effect on your seed body. Every action you take modifies your seed body. So the results may not be coming immediately, but the pending results are all stored in your seed body. So you can see your seed body is not a static thing, it's very dynamic. Every action you take influences your soul, influences your seed body. Grooves are created with every action. The more action you take on a dedicated manner, continuously we do, the grooves are much deeper, and that will have a much longer effect on your seed body. So if you want to modify your seed body, if we do the right actions, your seed body will be modified accordingly as such. So every action you take doesn't go waste, because it's always modifying your seed body. So whatever action you take in this life also, it's continuously being modified. Your seed body is being modified. So it doesn't get wasted ever. So the other very important, interesting question is, where is the location of the soul now? That's a very interesting subject. It's a very speculation. There's no confirmation that there is a location of the soul. But if you use some logic, we can understand where the soul lies within us, basically. In Vedanta, there's a word called spiritual heart, or they call it the spiritual cave, spiritual guha, which is a cave. So that spiritual cave, which Vedanta talks about, is nothing but your seed body. And that is the host for your soul as such, basically. So where is the location of this seed body? Ramana Maharshi, who is a very famous and a very revered saint, he always mentions your seed body or your soul is 2 inches or 2 fingers away from your physical, on the right-hand side of your physical heart. So he has mentioned this many times. Although it's a speculation, but if you apply reasoning, it does seem the right place to have. For example, when you point yourself, when you say, I am Jayant, where do you point yourself? You don't point yourself to the legs. You don't point yourself to his hand saying, I am Jayant. You don't point out to your eyes that I am Jayant. You always point to the right-hand side of your heart. When you try this yourself, when you want to refer to yourself, you always point to 2 fingers away from this physical heart, which is out here. And that is the point which Ramana Maharshi says, where your seed body is residing. It's not a physical thing. It's a very subtle thing. It's not a gross thing. It's a very subtle thing. The spiritual heart is where the seed body is residing, or the soul is residing in the spiritual heart as such. So we now have a basic understanding of a seed body. There also is a thing called the cosmic seed body, where all the individual seed bodies live or stay together or reside together. The total sum of all the individual seed bodies is called the cosmic seed body. So you have a seed body, I have a seed body, the trees have seed bodies, every living being has a seed body, and that seed body all reside within the cosmic seed body. So there's a cosmic seed body, which is a sum total of all the individual seed bodies. And you can imagine that complicated place that must be, because there's so many different seed bodies lying all over the world, and all living beings have a seed body, and they all are housed together in a cosmic seed body. So there must be a fully functional universe of seed bodies. So it's a speculation, nobody knows, but if you apply logic, it does make sense. There must be a cosmic seed body where all the individual seed bodies are resident, and there must be rules and regulations within that cosmic seed body, which all the individual seed bodies function in a very systematic manner. So now that we have understood what the soul is the feeling of I-ness within you. The soul is the ego part of you. It contains all your personality traits. It contains all the karmas pending within you. And this soul is resident 2 fingers away from your physical heart. So with this understanding of the soul, Now let's try to understand heaven now. Does heaven exist? If you see the definition of heaven, Merriam-Webster has two definitions for heaven. One definition is the heaven with a small h, which is the expanse of space that seems to cover the earth like a dome. So it's something which is the sky, you can call the sky, which is like a dome covering the earth. So that is the small h. Then there is a heaven with a capital H, and that is the dwelling place of the deities and the blessed dead. So you can see in the first definition with a small h, it talks about space that seems to cover the sky like a dome, but there's no indication of the dwelling place of the deities and the blessed dead in that small h. And if you take the big H definition of heaven, it talks about the deities of the God and the blessed dead. It doesn't talk about space and doesn't talk about the sky outside. So I feel these two definitions have got mixed up and has created a lot of different confusion among people. When you see people, when you ask them, where is God? They will point it towards the sky. They will point God towards the sky. And when they want to pray to God, they always look towards the sky and then they point towards thinking God is there. God is not in space at all. There is no heaven out there. There is only space there. There's three dimensions, X, Y, and Z dimension. There is no heaven or God sitting in the sky out there. The location of the God is in a different place. Let's try to understand where is a God resident and where is heaven resident. There's a concept of heaven versus hell. Many religions have this concept of heaven and hell. Heaven they call the abode of the God and the blessed souls. The God lives in that heaven, and hell is the abode of the damned. And I like to mention in the previous slide, a lot of people believe God, where the heaven is, they believe heaven is in the sky above there. They show a cloud, sometimes images you see of a cloud, and you see some angel with wings sitting in that cloud, trying to indicate that God is living in the sky. There's no God or heaven in the sky out there. It is in a different location. We'll try to understand this concept based on Vedanta. We'll try to give a concept, perspective on the abode of God. Where does God reside? And also the abode of the dead. Where do the dead soul reside? Let's do that. Abode of God. God is omnipresent. We all know that. So what does that mean? It means that God is everywhere. Does that mean that God doesn't have a place to stay? Does God have an abode? Yes, God has an abode. And you'll be surprised by the answer. The answer is your seed body, your soul is where God is resident there. So that is where God is residing, is within your soul, within your seed body. This may seem a drastic question answer. We will try to show you that why God is resident within your soul, within your seed body. Right within your spiritual heart, God is resident there. So let's try to understand this. To do that, we need to take a step back. We need to understand self-awareness. We have discussed the concept of self-awareness in a lot of different presentations and webinars. We will not go into that much detail out here. We will try to say that self-awareness is something which is right. Your innermost core is self-aware. And this self-awareness is like a bulb, like you can say a bulb only radiating awareness, shining awareness. It does nothing except shining awareness. And this self-awareness, which is your innermost core, is full, it's complete, and it is non-dual. What do you mean by non-dual? Non-dual means we live in a world of duality. We have a subject here and the objects out there. So there's two separate things. There's a separation. So that's why we call it, we live in a world of duality. But in self-awareness, there is non-dual. It means the subject and object are one. The subject is equal to object and object is equal to subject. It may be a concept which is very difficult to grasp, but you can just imagine there's something within you in which the subject and object are one homogeneous unit basically. So it is non-dual, and that is your innermost core. And that innermost core, since it is non-dual, it is full, complete, and it doesn't need anything. It doesn't do any action. It just sits there and radiates awareness basically. and radiates awareness. And awareness is a concept we have discussed earlier. It's got a lot of powers in it, but we will not go into that detail out here. So if your inner core is self-awareness, why don't we know it? Since we don't know self-awareness, ignorance pops out. Whenever you forget something, ignorance pops up. When you've forgotten that we are non-dual, we are full, we are complete, we are self-sufficient, what is our innermost core? If we don't know that, and we have forgotten that concept, what happens? Ignorance pops up. When ignorance pops up, it covers up the self-awareness. So self-awareness gets hidden behind ignorance here. So right now, most people are ignorant in this universe. That is because the ignorance is covering the self-awareness around it. Because the self-awareness is your innermost core, and the ignorance is covering that self-awareness. Let's try to understand the connection between soul and ignorance there. Ignorance by itself is one entity, but ignorance can be divided into small pixels, and you can call them a pixel of ignorance. So each living being has a pixel of ignorance. You have a pixel of ignorance. I have a pixel of ignorance. Every living being has a pixel of ignorance. And this pixel of ignorance would depend on your profile of how much ignorance you have and how much knowledge you have. You may have knowledge on some subjects and ignorance of other subjects, and someone else will have knowledge on those subjects and ignorance of that. So each person has a separate profile of ignorance and knowledge, basically. So each one has a pixel of ignorance there. And this pixel of ignorance, if you understand it properly, is your seed body. So your seed body, if you ask me what it is made of ignorance, basically. Because there are only two things in the universe. One is self-awareness and ignorance. So your seed body, your soul, everything is made of ignorance, basically. And obviously, as you get more knowledge, the profile of the ignorance keeps changing because a little bit of knowledge keeps seeping inside. So the profile of the ignorance also keeps changing. Ignorance doesn't mean it's 100% ignorance. It means that the ignorance is dominating, ignorance knowledge profile is there. So to answer this question, what is seed body made of? The answer is ignorance, basically. So there are the full ignorance which is covering up self-awareness has different pixels of ignorance, and each pixel represents every living being has a pixel of ignorance. You have a pixel of ignorance. I have a pixel of ignorance. Every living being has a pixel of ignorance. And that pixel of ignorance is the same thing as the seed body, is the same thing as the soul. So what happens now? You have the seed, you have a seed body, you have the pixel of ignorance. And so we take the example of a mirror now. When you have a sun shining on the mirror, what happens? You have a sun and you have a reflected sun, the original sun and the reflected sun there. So in a way, there are two different suns in a way, because there is an original sun and there's a reflected sun. The same thing, what happens is that the ignorance has a reflecting surface, basically. Just have to imagine the ignorance has a surface just like a mirror there. When the self-awareness is shining, radiating and shining awareness, it gets reflected on that pixel or of ignorance, basically. So that so you get a reflected awareness on that pixel of ignorance, and that reflected awareness is God. That is what the Vedanta defines as Ishvara. The Ishvara is what is the reflected awareness. So you may ask a question. There is one self-awareness, and how can there be so many different reflected awareness or reflected God in each pixel, basically? The classic example which is given in Vedanta is a bucket of water. If you have hundreds of buckets of water sitting outside in the open, and you have one sun shining on these hundreds of buckets, what do you see? There's the original sun, and each of the buckets will have a reflected sun in them. The same way, each pixel of ignorance will have a reflected awareness. So the God is resident in your pixel of ignorance, basically. It's a very powerful concept. So the God is sitting so close to us, is sitting within your pixel of ignorance. But the fact is also to say, in a way, God is dependent on your ignorance. If there was no ignorance, around anywhere in this universe, you only would have self-awareness. You will not have reflected awareness. So in a way, God is created within our soul because of our ignorance, basically. And all the powers which are within self-awareness pop out, and they are within God now. And the God has all the powers, and it is using those powers sitting in your soul and activating your, what do you call those traits which are there within your blueprint, source code, which is within your seed body. So the God is using his powers within your soul to activate your inner core, basically, your seed body as such. So it's very interesting to understand that God is sitting within you, within your seed body. And if you take Ramana Maharshi's example, it is 2 fingers away from your physical heart. God is sitting there, basically. So it's a point to reflect, point to understand that God is right within you, right within your soul. God is sitting there. So we understand the abode of God now. Abode of God is nothing but your soul, your seed body is where God is residing within you at the moment. So where's the home for the dead or the soul? So what happens when you die? The simple thing what happens is your seed body disconnects from your physical body. That's what happens when you die. The seed body disconnects from the physical body. So when does and how does the seed body disconnect from the physical body? According to Vedanta, each one of us, when you come in this life, you have a bunch of karmas for which you need to face the results of there. When you finish facing the results of those karmas, the seed body has no more pending karmas of this life. There may be more pending karmas sitting elsewhere, but for this life, all the pending karma has been completed, and this is according to Vedanta. Then the seed body is no more required. It disconnects itself from the physical body. And then it goes back and gets another bunch of karmas, and it looks for another seed body, another physical body. We'll discuss that later on again. So upon death again, the soul does not travel anywhere. A lot of people have a misconception that soul travels. Some people say the soul breaks through the skull and travels. No, once it disconnects from the physical body, it remains in the cosmic seed body. It is always within the cosmic seed body, and it just remains in the cosmic seed body. The only difference is that it doesn't have a physical body to work with, basically. But that's the seed body, which is now deactivated. The personality traits, the pending karmas, they all remain within the seed body. So in a way, the seed body never dies. The seed body always has pending karmas and never dies. So the soul, the location where the soul lives is within the cosmic seed body. There's a concept of lokas within Vedanta. We need to discuss that. It's a very interesting concept. Lokas means, in Vedanta means the plane or realm of existence. It's equivalent to, you can say, heaven and hell. Those are 2 different realms. Vedanta teaches, there are 2 different concepts here. One, usually they divide this realm of existence into 3 different planes: heaven, earth, and other land. And there are many other scriptures which also claim, which divide that the realms of lokas can be divided into 14 planes, 7 above and 7 below. All this is speculative, but it is understood the seed body could be placed in any of these different planes. So lokas is an interesting concept. Let's try to understand this in a little bit more detail. Like I mentioned earlier, there are only 2 things in this universe. One is your self-awareness, and one is the ignorance which is covering this self-awareness. There's nothing else in this universe except these 2 things: self-awareness and ignorance. All the objects you see around you are made of ignorance. Everything in the universe you see, the trees, you see people, the cars, you see anything and everything, they're all made of ignorance only. Because there are only 2 things in the universe: self-awareness and ignorance. And ignorance is the cause for all the different objects. So if you can imagine this ignorance is divided into different lokas, basically. If we have ignorance, if we can subdivide this ignorance into different planes, basically, starting with 0% ignorance to 100% ignorance. So 0% ignorance could be where there's very little ignorance, or maybe almost 0%. And that could call it heaven, or you can, people in Vedanta call it the Deva abode of the gods, the Deva lokas. Those are places where we have very little people there living in that abode have very little ignorance and such. And then they have abodes which are 100% ignorance. Those you can call hell or something like that. So there is a speculation that each loka is like a waiting room, basically. So when the soul dies, it is looking for a resting place. The resting place, it could be one of the lokas. If you have a profile of your soul is pretty good, you may go into a 5-star hotel, a 5-star waiting room, which is a 5-star of loka. If your profile of your soul is very poor, very bad, you may go into a 1-star hotel. Or if you have almost a perfect soul, you may go into a 7-star hotel. So you can say this lokas could in a way be a waiting room. But there are other texts also which mention that each of these lokas is like an independent universe as such. So once you do your karmas, which you have finished on this earth, you may go into another loka, and you may get another bunch of loka, a bunch of karmas to play out in that loka itself, basically. So there's all speculation. It's not, there's no concrete proof, but I'm just opening out this for discussion. It does make sense. Where does the soul rest after it dies, basically? And what Vedanta teaches, the soul will rest in one of the lokas, and the lokas will depend on your profile of your soul. If it is a poor soul, you may go into a better location. If your soul is in a bad shape, it will go into a poorer a 1-star hotel, like I mentioned earlier. So now we have understood the two topics. We have understood the soul. We tried to understand the heaven. We have understood where the God lives. We have mentioned the God lives within us. And we also mentioned the abode of the dead. It lives in the cosmic seed body. And the cosmic seed body could have different levels depending on the type of soul you have. Now let's try to understand transmigration. Does transmigration really happen? After death, the soul moves to another physical body. Same soul is there, but you get a new physical body. Reincarnation is another name, basically. There are many religions which have a different approach to this problem. They always mention there's only one life. There's one, at the end of that life, there's a judgment day. You either go to eternal hell or you go to eternal heaven. Again, no proof which is correct. So we'll try to understand the approach which is taken by Vedanta as such. Vedanta teaches, like, you need to understand the doctrine of karma. We have discussed that briefly here and there in this presentation. It mentions that every person must receive the results of their action. Every action you take must have a result. It is like Newton's third law of motion. Every action must have an equal and opposite reaction. The same way, every action must have a result, basically. Good actions you take must result into a good result. If you do bad action, it must result into a bad result, basically. But the question mark comes, when would the results be fructify? When would you get the results of your action? We're not going to go a lot of detail out here, but the end result is nobody knows when the results will fructify. When would you receive the results of your action? Would it be in 5 minutes' time? Would it be after 10 years? Would it be in this lifetime? Or it would be in next lifetime? No one understands this. Only the person who's giving the results, which is God, he has some understanding. In a way, he also may not understand because he's not like a micromanager. He has a full system working, and the results will happen when it is ready to fructify, basically. But the important issue out here, all pending results must be settled. You cannot have an account which is unsettled. You can never have an account in which there are some results which are still pending. You may die. Your soul may still have those pending results still sitting in your soul. So you need to find a way to get the results of your actions, basically. If you have not got the result in the current life, there are still a lot of pending results which need to fructify. You need still to get the results. So what happens then? So you need to fructify your results, you need to find a new body, basically. So that's a basic concept which is used in doctrine of karma, that you have pending results, and to fructify those pending results, you need to get another new body, basically. And according to Vedanta, the process can be quite bleak, because it says that there are infinite results. So it would mean that you need infinite rebirths to repay your pending results. But the problem is that you are getting the results for your actions, but in this life you're doing new actions there. So which again your account is almost steady, basically. Your account hardly depletes in a way, basically, because you are getting results of your action, but you are doing new action. So those actions must have the results coming through. So the cycle is very bleak. To get out of this death and life issue is not easy, basically. So Vedanta only solution is to break the cycle. You need to achieve moksha to break the cycle. How it is done is not the focus of this talk, but it must be understood that if you want to get rid of your all your pending results which are sitting in your soul, the only way is to achieve moksha. The only way is to break that cycle, basically. So how does the transmigration process take place? We just mentioned that because of your pending results, you have to find a new physical body. After death, the seed body and the soul detaches itself from the physical body. So the cosmic seed body now has two types of seed bodies. One is the active seed bodies and one is the inactive seed bodies. The active seed body already has a physical body, so it is working fine there. But there are a lot of inactive seed bodies which is looking for a new physical body there. What's the procedure? No one knows. But we are sure, knowing nature, it must be well regulated. There must be rules, and there must be some systems out there, and by which the inactive seed bodies can get a new physical body. How that is done, nobody knows. There's an Upanishad called Garbha Upanishad, which is a very interesting Upanishad. It's a very small Upanishad. It's maybe about 20 verses are there. The focus of this Upanishad is to show the physical body, how the fetus grows in the mother's womb. So if you understand this, what is happening now? There's a physical body which is growing in the mother's womb there. And then there is a soul which is waiting for its turn in the cosmic seed body. So you can see there are two different areas, basically. So one is in the physical body is growing in the mother's womb, and then there is a soul sitting for a turn in the cosmic seed body. The Garbha Upanishad gives a lot of details of how the different body parts grow in the womb, basically. When do the hands come out? When do the legs come out? When the different body parts come out? It's quite amazing when you read that thing. I wish some medical students will go into that Garbha Upanishad and have a look to see what they are stating in that Upanishad and what physically happens in real life. Do they match? But one thing very important, what the Garbha Upanishad says is that the soul enters the womb of the mothers of that fetus or the womb, the body in the womb, physical body, in the 7th month. That is what Garbha Upanishad states very clearly. In the 7th month, the seed body or the soul of the person enters that physical body. So, in a way, the seed body in the womb becomes a personality only in the 7th month. And before the 7th month, you could call it just a piece of flesh which is growing in the womb, basically. It may seem drastic, but as per the teachings of Garbha Upanishad, the soul enters the seed body. It integrates with the physical body only in the 7th month. So this is what the Garbha Upanishad teaches. There's no way to prove it, but that's what Garbha Upanishad teaches, that in the 7th month, the soul is integrated with the physical body. Before the 7th month, the fetus is growing, but is growing without a soul as such. It is growing the normal process of the seed growing in the body of the physical body, but the soul or enters the fetus or the womb only in the 7th month. So that's the information which is given in Garbha Upanishad. Again, like I mentioned, is a speculation. Nobody knows. So let's conclude my talk. Just to conclude, the seed body, the soul is your seed body. And we have just mentioned your seed body never dies. It is always looking for new bodies there. And the God functions within the seed body. You must ponder on this question. You must always think that the God is within your seed body, within your soul. The God is sitting with all his powers there. So really, if you want to find God, yes, going to temples is a good idea, but you really need to find God within you as such, because he's sitting in your seed body itself only. And the heaven is not out there. It is within you. It's within the cosmic seed body. And the different lokas we mentioned, which again is a speculation, which is there. Different lokas are there. And this the seed body is, the heaven is what is called the lokas basically. And the transmigration must happen as long as we have pending karmas, and we all have pending karmas. We have infinite number of pending karmas. So transmigration is going to happen. Reincarnation is going to happen. And that is a fact basically. And that's what Vedanta teaches as such. With this, I'd like to thank everyone for their time they've taken.